The sea had never forgotten her. Every wave that reached the shore seemed to whisper a name only she could hear. She walked slowly along the beach, her wooden cane sinking gently into the soft sand, leaving a trail of footprints that the tide would soon erase. The evening sun painted the ocean in gold, just as it had when she was a little girl. She stopped for a moment and looked out across the horizon. "So much has changed," she whispered to herself. She had been an orphan long before she understood what the word meant. She and her older sister learned early that life would not wait for children who had no parents. They found comfort in each other, sharing whatever little they had and dreaming about a future that seemed impossibly far away. At 16, she said goodbye to the only home she had ever known. With a small bag of clothes and a heart full of uncertainty, she traveled to another country to work as a housekeeper. She cleaned floors, washed clothes, prepared meals, and cared for another family's children while quietly carrying the ache of missing her own sister. She was young, but childhood had already slipped through her fingers. 3 years later, life carried her to yet another country. There, she married a kind and hardworking man. Together, they built a family that became her greatest treasure. One by one, 6 children filled their modest home with laughter, arguments, scraped knees, celebrations, and endless love. She could not read a book. She could not write her own name, but she could read the faces of her children better than anyone. She knew when one was hiding sadness behind a smile, when another was pretending to be brave, and when someone simply needed to be held. Education had been taken from her, but wisdom had not. She taught her children lessons that no classroom could ever offer: to respect others, to work hard, to remain honest even when no one was watching, and to help those with less than themselves. Then came the war. The sounds of children's laughter were replaced by fear. Streets that once welcomed neighbors became places of danger. Home was no longer safe. With unimaginable courage, she gathered her children and left everything behind. They traveled to Europe, carrying little more than hope. It was not an easy beginning. There were new languages she could not understand, unfamiliar customs, cold winters, and countless challenges. Yet every morning she rose before dawn, determined to give her children a future she herself had never been given. Slowly, they grew. They went to school. They graduated. They found work. They married. They built families of their own. Every success they achieved became another page in the story she could never write, but had spent her entire life creating. Years passed, and then came another goodbye. Her husband, the man who had shared life's burdens and blessings with her, passed away. The silence he left behind was unlike any silence she had known. For the first time in decades, she felt truly alone. When the fighting in her homeland had faded into memory, she returned, not because the country was the same, it wasn't, but because part of her heart had never left. Now, in the evening of her life, she walks this beach. The waves remind her of the little orphan girl who once ran barefoot through the sand with her sister. The breeze carries memories of the young woman who crossed borders with nothing but determination. The horizon reminds her of the mother who crossed continents so her children could live without fear. She smiles as she thinks of them all, the little hands she once held that now hold children of their own. People sometimes measure a life by diplomas, wealth, or titles. She had none of those. She never learned to read the words in a book. Instead, she wrote her story in sacrifice. She wrote it in sleepless nights, in meals she skipped so her children could eat, in prayers whispered before dawn, in tears no one ever saw, and in love that asked for nothing in return. The tide crept closer, washing away her footprints one by one. She watched them disappear without sadness. Footprints in sand are meant to fade. The footprints she left in the hearts of her children never will.